kick that in. There it is. Thank you, Caitlin. And then as a UW program, I want to acknowledge our operating on ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk. We have a land acknowledgement that we use here in recognizing the sovereignty of Ho-Chunk and our other tribal partners in the state of Wisconsin. Very excited to bring this program forward as a representative of Sacheen. And I think Caitlin's going to show the land acknowledgement. Thank you, Caitlin. The University of Madison occupies ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Dejop since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state government repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. This history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. So Sacheen is delighted to sponsor the program for this afternoon, along with the Wisconsin Partnership Program, which has provided some support, the main support for the team that you're going to hear from. Our plan today will be to provide a overview of the project generally and introduce the team members. We're going to have each project team member present kind of in a quick succession, sharing their insights and achievements to date. This project is live, they're still doing their work. And we'll close with a Q&A portion towards the end of the session. I believe the Q&A option at the bottom of the screen is available to viewers, or you can put things into the chat. Our team will be monitoring both and using those to inform some facilitated questions later in the program. And I'm looking to see if Carey Gleason has arrived yet. Oh, she's running late. This is a reality of working in academic health centers. So Dr. Gleason is running a little bit behind, but hopefully she will join us in the next minute or two. I'm probably a tad bit ahead of schedule. So let's just take a minute, get coffee, get drinks. We'll be with you in just a moment when Dr. Gleason lands with us. Thank you so much, Ornella. Dr. Gleason. Oh, somebody complimented my polka dots. Thank you so much, Katrina. This is scary. I could get distracted in the chat real fast. Okay, Dr. Gleason, can we switch over to her? She's going to introduce the project and players and our first panelist.
Okay. Can we please load the slides?
Welcome, Carey. Thank you.
Caitlin, are you able to load the slides?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thanks so much. So this project came about with original vision out of a conversation with our community advisory board, the Black Leaders for Brain Health. So right at the beginning of the pandemic, there was talk of around how this was affecting the community. So our Black Leaders for Brain Health challenged me in a really creative way. I mentioned sort of as an offhand comment that there was an opportunity for funding to address COVID in various communities. And I said, well, this is not my area. So it's not something I'm necessarily going to pursue. And the Black leaders challenged me and said, well, why would you not pursue something if it can help our community? So it got the wheels turning. So that was the original genesis of the project. There was a funding opportunity from the Wisconsin Partnership Program. So I want to thank them for supporting this. And the COVID response grant was the main goal for the funding. So we decided to pursue this. Why not, if it's going to benefit the community? Next slide, please. So the idea was to leverage our existing relationships. We had a strong relationship with Madison's Black community and with the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. And the idea was, with a partnership with Dr. Mora Pinzon, to extend this to Madison's Latinx community. And the choice of working with these three communities came out of what we were learning about COVID's effect on communities. The headlines already in June of 2020, it was evident that the Black and Latino population, and to some extent too, the data were emerging around American Indian populations, that they were being affected, had a disparate effect with COVID pandemic. Next slide, please. So our leadership team that we assembled, Melissa Metoxen, Dr. Mora Pinzon, and myself, we were getting updates from our university programs on a weekly basis, if not more often, about the current status of the pandemic, the treatment options that were available. We were getting the most up-to-date information. So our goal was to then bring that information to the community in using an empowerment model. So next slide, please. And how best to do this? There's also plenty of information about the importance of social media and also social influencers. So we used initially that term social influencers. You'll notice later that that term changed to community advocate. But our initial frame of reference was to think about social media. So I highlight a couple of headlines here. It doesn't take a village to fall for misinformation. So the importance of social media was already being discovered. And it can also increase accurate information. So our goal was to leverage our existing relationships in the communities to then transmit what we have, information we have from the university, to the community using a social media and social influencers model. Importantly, I want to highlight this. The information, for it to be effective and to reach its targeted community, it had to be relevant to the community. So you'll see in much of what we discussed today how information is tailored to be relevant to a community. Next slide, please. So the model is to move information from the university to the community. That's our goal. And how best to do that, could you forward, please? Is to translate information from a scientific and medical advisors to the community through the use of communication and digital media specialists, and to include our influencers as the main conduit to that information. So this is our empowerment model, where we take information from the university and employ influencers from the community to translate information and transmit information that is relevant to a community. Next slide, please. So our social influencers. So this was, we'll have a discussion from each community that we're working with and how our influencers were selected, what we were opting to highlight or emphasize in working with the community, and how those influencers were selected based on those goals. And as you noticed, as I mentioned earlier, that the name change from social influencers to community advocates, and that was intentional. The idea is that we're not just trying to influence, we're actually trying to advocate for the community. And again, following an empowerment model. So you'll meet today Venus Washington and Sacheen Lawrence, and from the Latino Health Council, Lizbeth Salerno and Ashley Giselle Benitez. So we will highlight the work of each group within the community. Fernando Cano Espina worked with our group initially, and then later handed things off to Lizbeth and Ashley. So next slide, please. Important for this team to work together. I describe George and Ornella as the glue for this, for the work that we're doing. George Levy came to this project with a background in communication and marketing and graphic design, both for print and media, digital media. And Ornella is a graduate student in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication. These were essential team members. So you'll notice later on that we talk about every, if you intend to replicate this effort, we recommend that you have a George and Ornella on your team, key players and the glue to this project. Also part of the team, I want to thank again our funders, the Wisconsin Partnership Program, our scientific and medical advisors. We intentionally sought individuals who had a foot in the community to the extent that was possible, and sought their expertise in translating scientific information and then handing it off to our marketing team and our digital media specialists. And then they translated it further with the help of our influencers. We had key partnerships with the Latino Health Council. You'll hear about that later as well, and the Wisconsin ADRC, or Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. So I will thank again my co-PIs, Maria Mora Pinzon and Melissa Metoxen. And again, we'll be hearing from each of the different communities separately. Next slide, please. I believe that is it. So with that, I would like to introduce our first group of presenters. This is the group working with the Latinx community, and Dr. Mora Pinzon will be taking it from here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gleason, and thank you everybody for being here. Also, thank you to everybody that has made this work possible. And I think as we start, I'd like to make a couple of mentions. When you think about social media, there's many platforms out there. Facebook is the most commonly used, followed by YouTube. And then we see that Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, they are lower on the list, but each one of these have a different role when we think about social media. And it's important to remember that not all the platforms are the same. Each one has a different time frame, like your message is out there for 15, 20 minutes, and after that it's sort of lost in the void. So when we think about the role of social media in this project, these are the things that we learn and how to overcome the challenges and also use the many opportunities that the social media platform has. Talking about the Latinx community, I like to go back to March 2020. And by then, we think about March 1st, 2020. By then, the Latino Health Council is a non-for-profit organization here in Dane County that has been in existence for 25 years and includes representatives from over 40 organizations serving the Latinx community here in Madison. The chairs of the Latino Health Council are Dr. Patricia Telles-Giron and Shiva Vidar-Silaf. They are not only very well known in our community, but leaders and advocates that are fighting for our community in multiple locations. One of the things that the Latino Health Council does is that they have a radio program, for example, and that's a monthly radio program that has been in existence for over 16 years when they share important information about what's happening with health. So when March 2011 happened, this is the first post from the Latino Health Council. It was a link to the CDC saying, hey, this is happening. We got the first few cases here. Be aware of this. But then you see that as with everybody, we didn't realize on March 11 what were the implications. And March 13, then there's a special radio program like, hey, we know that there's a lot of questions. We are starting to close out. We are hearing about closing businesses or specific other activities. Come to the radio program, give us a call. We will try to answer your questions. And the more the pandemic started, the more the Latino Health Council already started working on, okay, how can we transmit this information? And these are a couple of examples from Marta Saucedo and Fernando Cano Ospina sharing mental health support and ideas on how to cope with the things that are happening for all of us. So when this project came, it was two-folded in the sense like, how can we support the work that Latino Health Council is doing? And also how can we expand it? How can we learn more things that we can then use in the future to improve the health of our community? And that's where our two community advocates come in. The Latino Health Council has a strong, very, very strong representation in Facebook, and they have a team of advocates, a team of volunteers posting and creating content and doing different activities. So, but for this project, it was how can we synergize with the other communities? How can we learn how to expand beyond Facebook? And I will let now them to introduce themselves about what they have been doing and what they have learned.
Hi, I'm Ashley Benitez. I am a first year UW-Madison, and I'm the community advocate for the Latino Health Council, but on Instagram.
Hi everyone, my name is Lisbeth Solorzano, and I am also a UW student, and I'm in my third year, and I have been on Twitter.
So we're going to start off with the Instagram account, which is my respective platform that I use. And throughout from October 2020 to April right now, the Latino Health Council on Instagram has posted 86 posts. And from those posts, we've had 255 engagements, 4.3 thousand post impressions, and 3.9 thousand post reach. And as you can see with this graph from October until now, the followers on the Latino Health Council's Instagram page has steadily increased, and now currently we have 193 followers. So there's two main strategies that worked really well on Instagram, and one of them was that culturally tailored posts did really well, and that's a really important strategy to use for Instagram. And so you can see these two posters that I made, and they have to do with Halloween. And in the Latino community, Halloween and the Day of the Dead is a celebration that's very sacred to us, and it's a very big deal. And so it's celebrated a lot. And so during COVID, we were trying to advise people if they are going to stay in, how to celebrate it safely. And if they were going to go out, how to take care of themselves and celebrate Halloween in a COVID-friendly way. Next slide, please. And so, and another strategy that worked really well on Instagram was that posts are visually appealing did so much better. And so, as you can see, these are two posts. The first one is had to do with how to disinfect toys and with kids, especially now in COVID, with kids putting in blocks in their mouth. And so it was very important for parents to know how to disinfect their kids' toys safely. And so it was a video, and you can see how it's very bright. The colors are, the greens contrast with each other in the blue. And obviously we are here to provide reliable information and stuff that people are going to use. And so in order for these resources for people to actually utilize them in their daily times, you have to get their attention somehow. So we were trying to make visually appealing posts. And as in the other one, you can see it was Christmas themed, and it was an invitation inviting people to celebrate COVID in a virtual manner. And so these are examples of success. If you look to the left, you see this poster that's purple, and it's a poster I created for the vaccine series that we had. And as you can see, it's very vibrant, and it was a post that I personally created. So I took the time to write down the information, pick the pictures, and pick the colors. And as you can see there, this post had 360 impressions and 4 engagements. However, as you can see on the right, this is an example of something that didn't do really well. So when we repost like CDC flyers or infographics that have already been made, people tend to not really engage with it, or it doesn't do as well as something that's personally created. So you can see here, this one only attracted 47 impressions and only had 2 engagements. And this is another example of success. And these are the 4 videos from our vaccine series I just talked about previously. And as you can see, from these 4 videos, I received 642 impressions and 32 engagements. And so videos and a person actually talking to the camera did far better than those that didn't. And again, here is the visual appealing aspect once again, with the pictures and the bright colors, and the words are bolded and big. Okay, so there's challenges that come with Instagram. One Instagram is a much more casual and less formal social media platform. Usually if you go on Instagram, you'll see people on vacation posting pictures of them with their friends, family, maybe occasionally you'll see a picture of their food. So it's much more casual and less formal. And so that was a challenge because COVID is a very serious topic. It's a very formal thing. And so I had to find a way and to navigate and make posts that are much more appealing to my audience. Also, posts have to be in both languages. There are many people on Instagram, especially first gen Latino kids on there. And so they're all bilingual. And so posts would have to be made in English and Spanish, which was really challenging sometimes. And as you can see in this graph, Instagram has a large demographic range. So it ranges from teens to middle-aged families. And so obviously teens have different needs and stuff they want to know compared to middle-aged families. And so it was very hard and challenging to create a post that would benefit this large range of people.
Okay, so here I have the analytics for the Twitter platform. And since October, the tweets we have created have been 149. And we have gone from 39 followers to 90 followers in that time frame. And overall, we have gotten 352 engagements and 566 clicks. And this may not seem like much, but when looking at the graph from the first slide, the amount of people that are actually using Twitter is very minimal in comparison to other platforms like Facebook and Instagram per se. And here are the 3 types of formats I have used to create my content. The first is a poll. This has been used to increase engagements as when asking for simply questions or people to comment in the flyers or text or whatever I'm producing. It's very, there's not as much engagement as when doing a poll. And the second format are flyers, as Ashley mentioned. It's when it's much personalized and created by ourselves, it gains much more impressions and engagements from the audience. And then the final format are videos, and which we have used to do our vaccine series and other videos as well. And then here is a topic that did very well, which was the interview we did with Dr. Nazia Saftar. And the reason why this did very well was because we asked her very culturally relevant questions to our Latinx community. In addition, the audience on Twitter is much more professional and people are just looking for information to share, and it's less of a platform where it's just for entertainment. And then one of the strategies I did on Twitter was to culturally tailor my content itself. And an example here is on the right of a video I did where I merged the cultural element of cooking and passing down our traditional dishes to our kids and with our family and spending time around COVID-19 and staying at home and providing them that idea of what to do and have fun at home without having to go out. And with this, in this video, I actually created a Mexican traditional dish called chilaquiles verdes. So it was a little bit much more fun than just a speaking video. And some tips I have are to create content that is share-worthy / visually appealing. And this is because it gains people's attention more when they're just scrolling through whatever platform it may be. And with this, in addition, you can kind of tell it looks very pretty and there's distinct colors and kind of matching things with one another and the way it's formatted and the images that I use as well. And it's also important to keep up to date with what is trending. And with this, what really helped was going to the trending Twitter page. And on there, they keep a list of the top tweets that are circulating, such as keywords or actual hashtags themselves. And what I did with that was incorporate that into the text of my descriptions of my tweets. And finally, it's important to maximize the use of the platform. And by this, I mean, when creating videos, they have certain features that are very distinctive to Twitter. And one of those is that you cannot post a video that is over 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And when you create a video that is over that, you have to upload it to YouTube and then link it into the tweet. And because of that, when people come across it, they may feel discouraged because they have to click on it and then be redirected to another site. Whereas when you keep it under that 2-minute and 20-second time frame, people are automatically comes across their feed. And an example of a success is with a post I did for Dia de los Muertos, because again, it is a very important holiday in our culture, and the cultural elements from the pictures themselves are very eye-catching, and the colors as well. And with this, I posted this on the exact Dia de los Muertos, and because of that, it was a trending topic at the time, prior to when I posted this post and one in English on the day prior to Dia de los Muertos. And then it did not do significantly as much well as this one did. And I would say one of the biggest challenges on Twitter is that the word limitation can be very, very difficult to work around, as we have learned that using hashtags and keywords and providing links in the content themselves of the text is very important and increases engagement. And because of that, I have to be very concise with what I'm saying. And in addition to, I'm very limited on the hashtags and other things I can include. And the reason why this is beneficial to the community is not only to the Latinos, but in addition to the community as a whole, and everybody who is around Latinos as well, because the information we are creating and providing out onto these platforms is very important for the health of everybody.
And I will add on that as Liz and I are community advocates, we have had the special opportunity in creating a special relationship with our respective pages, with Liz being on Twitter and myself being on Instagram. We both shared a post of sharing our personal stories as being UW students and as how we got involved with this project. And this has allowed for people that have viewed our information or the posts we've created to be personalized with us as we share personal stories that have happened to us and that we are also like them living through this, that we lived through this pandemic. And so this has allowed for us to create a personal sense with our community. And it's not like it's a big organization that's behind the screen giving them this information, but it makes them create this special connection with us, knowing that there's somebody behind the screen that's creating this personalized information that is relevant for them.
Okay, on that note, I would like to pass it off to Melissa, who will be talking about the Oneida community.
All right, Sigoi. My name is Melissa Metoxen. I'm a member of the Oneida Nation, and I work with the Native American Center for Health Professions at UW. As Carey had mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to be part of this WPP grant as the co-PI, and I was really grateful to be part of those initial conversations and have the chance to bring our community into this grant, especially during a time when COVID first started to impact our community. And it was a way for us to bring information to people in partnership with what the tribe was already doing. And so what I want to do is just share some brief information about the Oneida Nation for those that might not be as familiar. So we are a sovereign nation, and we're one of the 11 federally recognized tribes here in Wisconsin. We have a unique history and relationship with the state. Our tribal membership is approximately 17,000 members, and about half of those live in and around the Oneida Reservation. And our reservation is 65,000 acres and spans 2 counties, Brown and Outagamie, and is near Green Bay. And it was established in 1838 through a treaty from lands that were originally occupied by the Ho-Chunk, and Menominee tribes. So because we're a sovereign nation, we are able to govern ourselves. So we have a 9-member business committee, and those are elected officials who kind of do and help with, overseeing decisions and things that are made within our community. We have lots of different services and programs that we provide to our members, and those include things like education, a school system. On the left, you'll see the elementary school pictured, healthcare, tribal clinic, social services, law enforcement, and many other programs and departments that provide services to our community members. So just talking briefly about kind of how we identified an advocate for this position and how that came about. So as I had mentioned earlier, I work with NACHIP, and we have our main office in Madison, but we also have a second office, which is in Oneida at the Oneida Community Health Center, and that's where I work out of. And so we work with many of our tribes across the state, and over the years we've worked to be intentional in what we're doing with our communities and create long-standing trusting partnerships. And so when this opportunity came about, it was really important that we connected with Oneida to ensure that we had support for this initiative, and specifically with our public relations office for the tribe. And because when Maria and Carey and I talked about it, we discussed and what we were all envisioning for each of these communities. And for me, it was envisioning that this particular position would work in partnership with what the tribe was already doing in terms of sharing information around COVID-19. And a lot of that was already happening by the time that we were writing this grant and things. And so a lot of that communication was coming to our tribal members from our public relations director. And so I basically reached out to her to hear her thoughts on this opportunity and to see if she supported the idea of moving forward with this grant and kind of working in partnership with this position. And she liked the idea, she supported it. So once we got that green light, then we felt comfortable moving forward with including our Oneida community as a partner in this grant. And when we were talking about the community advocate position, we knew that we wanted somebody that lives in the community, was involved in the community and familiar with tribal operations and things like that. And so we're really grateful to be able to hire Sacheen. And so with that, I'll turn it over to her and she can share a little more about herself and the great work that she's been doing.
My name is Sacheen, and I'm the community advocate for the Oneida Nation. I just want to, so for the first slide, you'll see that symbol, which is the Wampum Belt. And if you were to scroll through my page, you will notice that I tried to use the color purple in a lot of posts, and also tried to use this symbol a lot in my posts. This is our Wampum Belt. It represents the Oneida history and an agreement to hold our traditions, because the history and laws are wrapped into it. The symbols represent the formation of the Confederacy of the 5 Nations, and the middle of the symbol is the Great Tree of Peace. And the wampum is originally made up of wampum beads from the quahog shell, and these shells are purple and white. And now a little bit about myself. So next slide. So again, my name is Sacheen Lawrence, and I am from the Oneida community. I'm an enrolled member of the Oneida Nation. I'm a mother to 8 children. I am involved in my community. I'm a vice chair of the Oneida Nation School Board. I'm a member of the Community Advisory Board that also works with UW-Madison. Next slide. The best way that I try to get out my information is to actually team up with the Oneida Nation COVID-19 team and the Oneida Public Relations Office, the Oneida Nation, the official Oneida Nation Facebook page, and another community page called ComChats. This way I was able to actually share my information and get more traffic for my Facebook page. And then next slide. So as you can see, the posts, some of these posts were shared on, let me see. My first post was created September 18th because the page still had to be created. I do have 45 posts to date. And I worked alongside with as I mentioned, the Oneida leadership, such as Comprehensive Health Division and Oneida Behavioral Health. These posts were created just like I had to come up with ways to make sure like my audience was engaged and how I was going to keep them engaged. And slide 4, please. To date, my page has 114 page likes. We have 123 page followers. And again, we have 45 posts. The Oneida Nation page has 13,000 followers. The ComChat page has 1.1 thousand followers. The different formats I had to use were I'm sorry, I was on the wrong slide. We needed to come up with ways on how we would share and present our information to our audience. We had to make sure our posts were culturally relevant and appropriate to our community. For example, this post includes culturally relevant activities to do, such as smoke dancing, which is an Oneida Longhouse dance style. Many Native Americans smudge because it clears the mind and body so that we can see clearly. So that's how I made my post culturally relevant. And this was one of my more successful posts that was posted. Slide 6, please. It's like an animation. Slide 6 is supposed to show the Thanksgiving post, which was definitely my most successful post. This was posted on December 3rd, and it reached 4,227 people, 206 post engagements, and there were 200 actions with the post, which included shares and comments total. Another successful one, the videos, was the recorded Q&A session with Dr. Nastia Safdar, who is an infectious disease expert. And I can attribute to the success of the engagements and views because I utilized 2 other forms of Facebook that Oneida Tribals use, which again is the Oneida Nation Facebook page and the community chats page. This has really allowed for a lot more visibility and engagement. Slide 7. As with all projects, there were definitely some challenges. It was hard to find factual data on Native Americans and COVID-19 because our population is so small, and trying to get my community to put trust into the research that was found. A lot of Americans don't really trust the government just because of the Native American history. Another challenge was creating posts and videos that catch the eye of the audience, developing a color scheme, or trying to come up with the creative ways to keep the attention of the audience. This is still a struggle for me because in some of my videos, people are only watching like the first 10 seconds. So I'm like, keep asking myself, how do I keep them watching? Something I'm still trying to figure out. And just coming up with creative ways to keep my audience engaged, like what types of posts can I do to keep them wanting more is a question I ask with like every single post I do. Next slide. When you have such a project as this, you will most definitely learn some lessons. This project is fairly new and it's such a learning experience, but what I have learned is that social media can be cruel, and there are some people who will not find your post informational or beneficial to them because their mind is already set on something And that's really hard to change. And trying to create posts that are culturally relevant to my Native American community is time consuming and takes a lot of creativity. I have to ask myself if this will benefit them, how it will benefit them, and how to incorporate my culture into every post. And of course, COVID is such a new virus. The information is constantly changing. So I need to work with my team and our researchers to ensure that I am presenting the most up-to-date and accurate information. It's definitely a learning journey. Slide 9, please. Benefits for myself include improved speaking skills. This is my first formal presentation, and I feel that by doing videos and posting them, I have learned to be less critical and more confident with myself, although there will always be some insecurities that I have. I have also learned different software programs to create these posts, and just the simple notion that I was chosen to be part of this extraordinary team that is trying to share all this important information with the communities. COVID took my job with the Oneida Nation, but it also presented me with this unique opportunity with this team. As far as community benefits, I am able to share my information with other established social media networks, such as the official Oneida Nation Facebook page. Oneida established a COVID-19 team at the beginning of this pandemic, but I was able to reiterate information that was put out there by this team, but in a different, more detailed way. And lastly, I think our community was more apt to accept the information from me because I grew up on the Oneida Reservation. I'm a member of the Oneida Nation, and I'm a pretty familiar face to the community, to them. And if I wasn't before, I'm pretty sure I am now. So next slide, Yonko for listening. I also want to say Yonko to the Wisconsin Partnership Program, Melissa, Carey, and my awesome COVID-19 team and researchers. Thank you. Oh, and now I'm passing it on to Carey, who is going to introduce Venus.
All right, thank you so much, Sacheen and Lizbeth and Ashley too for your presentations. So I do have some slides I'd like to pull up and introduce how we developed the partnership with the Black community. So as we mentioned, if you probably hear this coming through the talk so far, the community advocate is always somebody who is trusted in the community. I had the advantage of working with our Black Leaders for Brain Health, our community advisory board for an Alzheimer's disease project, who could then help me brainstorm about who would be a good fit for this particular project. So we thought long and hard about who would be best fit for this type of work. And the theme, again, I hope you're hearing this come through. It has to be someone who's trusted. So let's, next slide, please. And then to identify and recruit the advocate, it relies on a number of different skills. Not all of these skills can be taught. A huge theme that keeps coming through is the authenticity of our advocates and their clear investment in their communities. And those, again, are not skills necessarily that can be taught. However, we do believe that you can teach the skills that go into supporting the work. For example, you can teach and support people on posting videos. You can't teach people how to be a trusted advocate for their community necessarily. So we thought these factors that would support success for our advocates, again, trusted, connected, and the choice was very much community specific. So the partnerships with NACHIP and the Oneida Comprehensive Health were key in selecting Sacheen Lawrence. The connections with the Latino Health Council were very key in selecting Ashley and Lizbeth. Next slide, please. So focusing on Dane County, looking at where our Black population is, there's what's known as the crescent around the neighborhoods of Madison. So thinking about how we can be active in those communities, one of our key partnerships is an exercise class that we lead out of a South Madison location. And the leader of that exercise class is this fantastic health coach, Venus Washington. And I want you to notice, this is her page here. She had a significant online presence already. And you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner of her page here, her web page, are her connections with Twitter and Facebook. So she had the connection already. She's a trusted individual. And I knew I had the right person when I talked to Venus and she was interviewing me in this discussion. And very important element in this, she wanted to know basically if this were something that was clearly going to benefit the local Black community, and something too that this would never be a situation where I would ask her to post information or to convince people that in a way that would go against her fundamental beliefs. The idea really was about translating information and transmitting information in a culturally relevant manner. Never would I would ask her to put something out or convince people to do something that did not align with her belief system. And again, I knew I had the right person when I talked to Venus and she was, in a sense, interviewing me. So next slide. So that is the end of my slide presentation. I want to turn things over to the fantastic Venus, who will tell you about her work in the Black community.
Thank you very much, Carey. Let me pull up my slides. As I pull it up, I want you guys just take a deep breath. Inhale through your nose, exhale out through your mouth. That was for me and for you. Usually when we take in a lot of information, our brain gets scattered. So just take another inhale and exhale. So hello, everyone. I'm Venus Washington. So I am the community advocate for the Black community. A little bit about my background, which Carey, lovely Carey, shared. I am a personal trainer, health coach. And some ways that I'm connected in the community, I have an agency, Are You Fit with Dane County, is Community Comprehensive Services. And what I do with that agency, I work with individuals who have mental health and substance abuse issues. I also do the Get Moving class with Carey talked about that partners with the Alzheimer's Research Center. And we do that twice a week. So we have cheer classes, and then we also do like intervals classes that's free for the community. And then I also work with the Black Women's Wellness Foundation. So I teach classes for them as well. I partner with the libraries. I'll do like family fitness classes in the libraries. And I also worked with New Bridge, which is a senior living where they are connected with seniors. So I do classes for them as well. So that's me. And I also have a daughter who is 11 years old currently, full of life. All right, so a little bit how I do my reach on social media. We did create a COVID-19 page. The followers are not major. We have 18 followers and 17 likes. But how we really get more engagement is through my personal page. So I will share it from the COVID page, and also from the COVID page into my personal page, and also my professional page. So we did get some impressions, which is nice, 2,327 impressions and 203 engagements as of in February. And on my personal page, I have about 2,896 friends. And then on my personal page, I have 894 followers. Also, what's not mentioned is the YouTube. So I use YouTube as well. So when I'm doing videos, I post videos on there. So I have a small subscribe list on there too, which is 220, which is not on here, as well as the Instagram. So I'm using all of the platforms, trying all different ways, different messages to reach the Black community. So one strategy that we really jumped in and was like, ooh, this is gonna be the one, was I partnered with Jasmine Zapata. She's a doctor that is very engaged in the Black community. Like, you can catch her anywhere. So she's a celebrity in the Black community. And so the topic was about flu vaccines and how it can help you lessen the cause with COVID. And so we did this post. We partnered with UW. They had all the team. We got all this crew, did this, and we just got 379 views. On their YouTube channel, they have about 1,000 subscribers. So I thought we were going to get a lot more than this. And on Facebook, we didn't do too well. We shared twice and reached 58 reach. And so the reason why, I think the time of it was around in November. Maybe people were more invested in thinking about their family, thinking about, Thanksgiving coming up. I did do a follow-up post that did better than this. That's not on this slide, when I was talking about family and Thanksgiving. But this one I thought would work because I had this big time local celebrity, but not so much. This one that did actually do really well on Facebook was a mental health post. Now this was in December. And actually it doesn't have all the wording on it. It actually said like, check in with your teens. And I think that really hit home for the Black community, because around December is Christmas. Do we have the funds to get, presents? Is my kid doing okay? So I think it really hit home. And what I really liked about this post, the reason why I say it did well, is because we had engagement. We had people commenting, not just on Facebook, also on YouTube and on Instagram, like on all the platforms that I was sharing on. I had 1 or 2 comments on there, which was nice. And that's what we're looking for. And you can tell in this post as well that I think really does well for the Black community is the healing, having that healing element of, support and comfort. It just looks like the girl here just seems so safe and loved. And I think that really resonated for the Black community. And I think that's why the post did so well, and with the time as well. All right, next post. All right, some opportunities for improvements and challenges and constraints. So the big issues is so much information about, COVID that's coming out, and people having questions and trying to get them out quickly. I didn't mention before, but a lot of my engagement does not happen that much on social media. Just like when I was mentioning the things that I'm involved with, a lot of it is when I'm doing classes online. People are asking me questions. They know about what I'm doing in community. So it's really behind the scene. They would say, oh, could you talk about this? And it won't be posted on social media. So I will get a lot of questions that's outside of social media. And so to be able to respond to them quickly it was challenging. News stories, all that stuff. And we have a team where we have to check in, making sure that all of that information is correct. And one big challenge for me was the learning curve. I was already posting videos, but doing the editing and all the fine tune, making it look nice and all that stuff is still a learning curve for me. So I'm surprised that I'm even sharing my screen right. So, finding the connection too. So just like I was mentioning, making in the Black community, we always are cautious, right? We want to make sure that we are safe. And so social media in itself, putting my information out on social media doesn't feel that safe for in the Black community. So getting any engagement on the platform is like, whoa, that's amazing. So like what I was saying earlier, a lot of it is behind the scenes of people asking me questions that's not on Facebook. So finding that safe space for them. Our lesson learned, top 3 takeaways is being authentic, you know, not worried about being perfect. So especially if we're going into our communities, we want to be ourselves where people can feel, that makes people feel safe. Like if I'm being myself, then people feel like, oh, look, she done messed up. I can mess up, you know? She not perfect. Oh, well then it's okay. And then it kind of allows them to lessen and, you know, not feel like, oh, this is the science people. They know stuff. I can't talk. I can't say a certain way. Or, and then here I come saying all these words like, oh, she's safe. The next step that I learned was making sure that you got support. So like I was saying about the learning curve for me for tech support. So, you know, George was, you know, showing different ways to engage the audience. And then we also have Ornella who, you know, asking those questions to us to making sure that we are communicating clearly. You know, she always has to go back and make sure, Venus, what do you mean? So I really appreciate that. And networking in our community and telling what I'm doing, but also networking with the other communities as well. You know, the Native American community, that's probably my takeaway. Let me go until I move into that. What did I take? What have I learned? What's the benefits for my communities? Is a little goes a long way. I don't have to do everything. You know, seeing the numbers and like, oh, it's so many more Black people that I need to reach. It's like that little bit that I am reaching, that goes a long way, you know, and taking that in, you know, just taking an inhale and exhaling and knowing that, you know, doing the best that you can do. And the skills that I gained from this project, just like what I was telling you guys before, it was a learning curve, but also working with the team, you know, working with the people behind the scenes and also learning from the other community advocates, from the Native American community, the Latina X community. It's wonderful to be able to hear their stories and to be able to connect. So yeah, those are my takeaways. I hope you guys benefited from that, and thank you.
And I think we have Maria next.
Yes, and thank you everybody that has stayed with us. We have a couple more minutes. And what I'm going to present right now is just sort of this summary of this project. So you have heard about the connections, you have heard about how this is not just started from the university, but just building on those relationships that we already had and making sure that this was a benefit to the community, for the community, with the communities first and always in mind and always in center. So I'll show you a couple of things. This is one of the things that we have learned. So this is a post for the Latino Health Council in Facebook, just sharing information about COVID vaccine in Spanish. You see a very few people were reached, 77 and 9 engagements. Not bad. What happens when we use one of those, again, generic materials that is being shared, so a person get a flu shot, about the same engagement. Notice that none of these posts had a text or something that we're saying, hey, this is what we are telling you. Then we share information about one doctor in Nebraska that we usually share posts that he creates very nice videos. We got a little more engagement, 140 people, 24 engagements. People reacted, people liked it. Now, yeah, some of you might be thinking, we need superstars. Maybe we need to have more very big names to share information. Well, this is Dr. Juan Rivera. He's the medical advisor at Univision, very known, very common household face, at least in the Latino community, those that watch Spanish TV. And look, when we share his posts, still, we are just reaching 160 people. So it's not necessarily the message. It's not necessarily the message. is the messenger. La señora Yolanda, she's one of the pillars of our community. Everybody knows her. Look, she got her shot, and Latino Health Council shared the picture and gave information. How could you get the shot to 2,000 people reach? We need the information is more important when you keep it real. When it's real people that you know, when it's the people that you have talked about, that's when the information that's transmitted is more effective. And that's one of the main, we saw this across all of our communities. We are not trying to compare one community against the other. We're just trying to learn what works in each one, to be able to address those health disparities. So thank you. And all of this couldn't be possible without our team of Ornella, George, taking care of the digital aspects, but also we have scientists. And I think one of our scientists in the conversation is Dan Summers, who is one physician who said that helped our team to say, okay, how do we say this? How does this make it medically accurate? And each post took 4 to 6 hours to create. So if you're thinking of replicating this, think about the time, the effort, and all of the things that are happening behind the scenes. That is just more than, oh yes, here's a picture and that's it. Please, a round of applause for all of our team, and thank you so much for being here. And I know we have a few questions.
Dr. Mora Pinzon, thank you so much. This is Sarah. I'm watching the chat, and also we had a question in our Q&A. So the first question that came in was to ask for feedback from the project team about specifically reaching individuals who may not be as savvy with social media. We know this project team focuses on utilizing social media and seeing what works, but could you speak to anything you've learned or are ready to share with regards to trying to do some of this work with folks or engage with folks who may not be social media users?
That's always the fear. I can say that more people is using social media than we know. Many older adults are using social media, particularly Facebook is becoming very, very popular among them. But think outside the box. I think, for example, we've been using a lot of the radio to transmit some messages, but each community and each location is different. So think around.
Yeah. And just to add a little to what Maria said, we also realize, even though for the African American community, there are a high percentage of the population are older, we noticed that a lot more of them were interacting with the content through MailChimp, for example. And so what we did was to incorporate the use of MailChimp, which is our email marketing campaign platform, with the Facebook posts to make sure that we could create a flow from one to the other.
Thank you, George.
Sure, and if I may add to that, and I want to thank you for that question. That's really important. I want to encourage people to think about social media as more than just Twitter or Instagram, but think of it even as, going back to thinking about like our church bulletins, our social media, in a print format, of course. So I know, for example, that Venus's newsletter is extremely popular. 900 and some individuals subscribe to that newsletter. And that can be something that can go out either in a print format or through a social media platform. So again, using multiple different approaches, as Dr. Mora Pinzon pointed out, think outside the box. Think outside of Instagram.
Yeah, I would agree. I definitely noticed with my MailChimp email that I got questions from my email that didn't get posted on social media or like Facebook, but it was in an email because a lot of my clients are older, are seniors. So yes, I noticed that.
And I would add to, for Oneida, Sacheen had mentioned that she's part of the community advisory board, one of them that Dr. Gleason's team facilitates, and there are representatives from elder services, from the veterans office. And so even just like word of mouth, them seeing her on this cab and then her talking about it, it gets out that way too, because our community isn't that big. And so, you know, word gets around that, oh yeah, Sacheen's doing, you know, this work with the university and things like that.
Thank you, Melissa. Other comments from the panelists on that question? The person that posted also asked, especially for any platforms that you have had success with for reaching or engaging with older adults. I'm afraid to ask what the person might be defining as older. Let's say 55 and older.
According to teenagers in Instagram, anybody above 20 is older. So I just
Thank you for keeping it real, as we said. I'll let folks sit with that. If they have thoughts, they can contribute them. We had another question specifically for Venus about whether and how she's able to engage with Black churches locally.
Yeah, I think that is a really great question, and the Black community is a great platform to reach the Black community. I have not yet personally engaged, but definitely will. Yes.
Thank you. We have another question that I see Dr. Maria is responding to in the chat. If you are part of a team looking to engage with these communities for other health outcomes, what would you advise as your first steps?
I was typing, build those relationships first.
Thank you.
One of the things is that this works because we have worked in other things before. And even when we, at least for the Latino community, when I say, hey, this is what we're thinking, and they told me, you know, that's not going to work with us. For us, it might be work a sub-award rather than hiring just one person to support the teams of volunteers that we have. So it's important that if we want to look at the health outcomes, is the community first, building the relationships first, and ask what they want and what's the priority. But I'll open to everybody else because I know that there's a lot of good ideas here.
I would say the same thing for our tribal communities, especially, you know, talking about Oneida in particular. You know, if anyone's interested in working with our communities, you know, that relationship building, I think I even mentioned that in my my discussion about building trust, and sometimes it might take a little while, especially with our tribal communities. We're sovereign, and so we have these various entities, legal teams, all these things that sometimes those have to be approved, you know, to do work and things like that. And then just like Maria said, making sure that it's something that the community will benefit from as well, and not just kind of like a one-way partnership.
Thank you, Melissa.
I was going to add to that too. Leveraging partnerships and thinking out of the box on that. As Dr. Gleason mentioned in the beginning, like social media is not her area of expertise. She's in kind of the Alzheimer's realm, but she knew people who were in that space. And so, you know, she kind of thought out of the box regarding what she could do and who she can pull together. So it's not always, you don't always have to be the one to have the relationship, but maybe knowing someone who has that relationship and has that partnership that you can partner up with, I think is another way you can start as well.
Thank you, Ornella. That's Ornella coming from the depths of the outside world, bringing expertise. Thank you, ma'am. I think each of the leaders represented here, both from the leadership team of the PIs or the principal investigators, as well as the influencers, are all well positioned. I'll just offer that Sacheen is also positioned to lend support to folks who might be trying to figure out those first steps. It's always important to identify somebody who is well versed and respected always. And if you're unsure about that, you're probably not in a position to just walk into an agency or a setting. Really important. There's lots of folks here on this panel today who can lend assistance and support. So feel free to reach out, and I'm sure we can help.
Yeah, Sacheen's a great suggestion to begin these conversations. What led to this proposal was just a series of conversations. So I would say there was more of an investment in talking with Melissa and Maria and Ornella and George, tossing around ideas and thinking through this. The writing part was actually the shorter of the efforts. It wrote itself by that time point. So the grant itself was shaped through the conversation. So a starting point is basically having the conversations. And if you don't have the connections, working with a group like Sacheen or NACHIP or Latino Health Council to talk about what relationships need to be built before you write a grant.
Thank you, Carey. We have another question in the box. I just want to acknowledge the question reads as follows. Do the communication specialists have specific advice on creating materials that are most likely to be shared and or resonate with the community? Our project is mindful of using inclusive language, photos, and color schemes, but are there other things to consider? I just want to acknowledge before we respond to the question that listening to these presentations, I respected that these community advocates or influencers weren't necessarily communication specialists 6 months ago. They've taken on a tremendous amount of new skills, both practical and applied, and also clearly they're all creative, wonderful, smart thinking people. But I think your question is very relevant, and I would welcome the community advocate, community influencers to speak to any particular things to consider as part of what they've taken on as part of the project.
I can start and then they can chime in too. So in terms of specific advice on creating materials that are most likely to be shared, I think one of the main things for that is ensuring that the message is relevant to the audience and is responsive to their needs. So that I think probably comes first. And then, the other things that the question mentions, having inclusive language, having inclusive photos, having visually appealing color schemes, and some of the other pieces that the influencers and the advocates talked about. But I think the main thing is for it to be shared and resonating with the community, is that it's relevant and it's responsive to their needs. One additional thing that works really well with some of the advocates was personal stories, right? Making it real, as we've talked about, but also personal to each influencers. Whenever they kind of shared about their own experiences, that also increase the likelihood of things being shared as well.
Thank you, Ornella. Other comments from our panelists?
I would have to agree with Ornella on a personal touch to your post, because as I said, like my Thanksgiving was my pretty most successful post that wasn't like a video where I had to but I kind of wrote a little story about what I usually did for Thanksgiving and what I did this year. And I kind of mentioned, I'm not making this post to be nosy, because that's what some people took it as. So that kind of engaged my audience more and got more shares.
Thank you, Sacheen.
I think something small, but also that has been helpful is the use of emojis. Specifically, I try to find emojis that pertain to what I'm talking about. Typically, it's like a heart or a smiley face, and because they're being used so much recently, just in our everyday life. And in addition to just that little emoji can say so much, rather than typing it out and just more connecting it back to the visually appealing aspect of my posts.
Thank you.
Really agree with Liz, but I would also add that like being authentic and being consistent with your posts, because these posts take a long time to make, and so if you don't make the time for the post, it's we're trying to put out like quality information, quality posts. So setting the time aside, like those 4 hours of actually looking through the research and putting doing the research and see what's relevant, what's appealing, what's going to attract more people really helps. But also putting your own like personal flair to the post and stuff, and not making it seem forced or something that it's not yours. And so I think people really appreciate that. And if you continue that without your whole post, it just creates that personal touch, and it really just shows your authentic self within these posts and within the community as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree on everything that everyone said. Being authentic, timing, yes, really works. And I think also the healing element, and where, especially in the Black community, to be able to see something that's healing, and seeing someone who's of color, like I think I do better on my posts where it's people, actual people in the post, and also my personal touch too, like just like what everyone was saying, being authentic, having some type of healing element in there, and timing is timing with, if it has to do with the community as well, topics to deal with the community. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I think we all can draw on experiences of the opposite, where well-intended but not carefully thought out or targeted messaging has gotten really poor results and a loss of trust, because it really throws things off if you're not paying attention to these many facets. We have another question in the Q&A. In the process of working with communities, what types of feedback did you get from participants about community needs or concerns? Yeah, I'd be curious broadly if the influencers could field that one. I'm also curious about any benefit that you're hearing from some of your different community members with regards to, you're in process. I realize it's early days and you're building following, but so the question is, any types of feedback have you gotten from community on needs, concerns, priorities?
I think when we started the vaccine, our first vaccine series, is where I was getting a lot of questions because people wasn't very sure about the vaccine. And so that really brought up a lot of questions and concern for the Black community. And so once I started putting the science behind it, the pros and cons, I got feedback saying like, thank you so much for that. I love it when you, like, I laid down the question, the time, like where it is in the video, because the video is maybe 3 minutes, and you know, people have short mind span. So they like, oh, I just want my question. So they can go on the post to find, oh, it's at a minute, and then go to the minute and say, okay, now I get it. And I think that really allows make them feel safe, like, okay, I'm understanding now, I got more information. And I think that was one of my takebacks that people have shared with me.
Thank you, Venus.
I'll kind of echo off of, oh, I'm sorry. You want to go?
You can go, Sacheen.
Okay, so I'm going to echo off of what Venus said, and she had from my community, I would say I got mostly positive feedback. I've gotten comments of, hey, you're really good at this. Thank you for this information. And I would say, just like Venus's like hot topic was the vaccine, because something I posted as simple as just a simple question. I asked, like, what, with the rollout of this vaccine, will you be getting it? And that just created a whole stream of comments, because people were like, I'm not getting it. And people were like, well, I'm getting it. But then I started putting out all this information, and I feel like my community, people that didn't want to get the vaccine, actually got the vaccine. So I kind of felt good about that.
Thank you, Sacheen.
And I think for
Liz?
my platform, that has been something that has been really, really difficult and something that we've been working on and we have had made some progress. So because in the beginning, there was no likes or no retweets, just nothing at all. There was just pretty much people just seeing the posts, the impressions themselves. Whereas now the engagements are like increasing by a lot because of that personal element that I'm including. And I include myself more and just make it a little more personal and use the knowledge I have myself being a student, and I'm also a CNA in the hospital, so I have a lot of experience in around COVID-19 itself and in general to being a Latina.
Thank
I
you,
just want to
Elizabeth.
add that Lisbeth also has been utilizing polls on Twitter. I think Ashley utilized the emoji thing where people can also give feedback in a similar poll-like voting manner. And people seem to respond well to that. So for their platforms, they had not been getting as much comments, as Lisbeth mentioned, as compared to Sacheen and Venus. But utilizing kind of a different approach of the polls with emojis and emoticons seem to help their community to respond and provide us with feedback as to their needs or concerns. So that's kind of how we have been addressing that issue, is to use kind of creative means of getting our online communities to tell us what they want to know about the issues.
Thank you, Ornella. Other thoughts from the panel?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on like what Liz was saying, both our platforms in the beginning weren't really receiving that many engagements or people commenting on their posts. And so it really took a long process and of trying to figure out what actually works. And so for Instagram, I remember I was trying to figure out, okay, what is the strategy that will actually make people engage within the posts and stuff. And so I remember I did this one post with emojis, like comment which emoji you really what you're feeling. And I think it was about like Thanksgiving, how'd you feel about Thanksgiving this year? I think I received one comment with an emoji and I was like, okay, I did that. And so then I resorted to seeing Instagram stories, because Instagram stories has so many features where people can interact with. And so I was like, okay, let me start with this. And so I started doing Instagram stories, and I've noticed that I would do a poll on there, and okay, I would receive some engagements. I was like, okay, from this, I'm gonna do a chat box, and from there I was receiving even more engagements. And so now I'm using this and so I've noticed Instagram stories work really well, but then there's a time where all the engagement just halts. So I was like, okay, now I have to think outside of the box and see where can I attract more people to our page. And so now I've used my personal page on Instagram, reposting our posts and putting them on my Instagram story, and then there I receive even more engagements and questions. And so I think it's just a learning process where you just have to figure out what works and go from there. And then eventually, you know, it will all just work out and people will start commenting and engaging. And it's been working really well ever since.
Thank you, Ashley. I wanted to ask you guys, Carey nicely provided the audience an idea of kind of the process used with the role of scientific advisors. And my impression is that they're kind of taking that fire hose of technical dense information and working with the team to package or clarify. But could you each speak to sort of how that works? I think as people are trying to figure out how to use this knowledge you're sharing today in their own worlds, it might be helpful to appreciate, you were so great at saying, 4 to 6 hours for preparing a post. What else goes into sort of the prep time when you're trying to communicate about COVID and the particular role those scientific advisors helped with? Can you speak a little bit to that?
I think something that I feel like we all do too is just be on social media itself, and just using for yourself what's trending and what is surfacing and seeing what people have to say really helps to narrow down what you want to put in your posts or what might need to be addressed right away and the urgency of things. And formatting that and organizing all that information that is very, very, very much a lot of information and can be a lot to organize, but yeah, that's helpful.
I'm hearing some help with prioritization and kind of finding match to community urgency or priorities too. I think we have a scientific advisor with us. I'm wondering if Dan, Ilan.
I think at least on our end, we basically tried to provide information that would be, accessible to a lot of people and would be easy to disseminate. I think one of the really important pieces of feedback that we got kind of early on was like trying to provide, like information that was relevant, specific to the communities, because that would have a greater impact on the people that we were trying to reach. And I think that was a really helpful piece of advice, and I think hopefully something that we were able to utilize. A lot of information comes through, kind of the big organizations like the CDC, but finding ways to kind of disseminate that at a level where people would feel more connected to it. I think that was really important.
Thank you, Dan. Other thoughts from the panelists?
Yeah, pretty much what Dan said. They were really instrumental in getting the influencers and advocates the information that they needed. So basically what we did is whenever the group came up with a topic that was relevant to their community, we reached out to the medical advisors and they researched the information, created documents, and sent us resources that were tailored to each ethnic group. And then the influencers would sift through that information for the angle that they wanted to utilize for their post. And so that's kind of how the trail goes. And so George and I just helps them then to translate that into ways that would be easy for their audience to digest.
So you had to find the hook, the right hook to connect the two pieces. Well, this has been incredibly informative. We are a couple minutes out from the top of the hour. Are there any closing thoughts that our panelists would like to share out? We've answered the questions that have been posed to us. Kind words coming in on the chat to everybody. Dan, thanks for joining us as one of the medical advisors.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, George.
Sorry. I was just gonna say one of the things that I think was integral in, especially with the last question, taking all the research and the data that we're given and transforming it to the posts that we share with the communities, is really the approach that we took. As a team, we decided that we wanted to, or post have a very healing centered focus. And so we tried to think about, the context of the information and how it relates to maybe the background or history of the community. And then what is our motivation? Like, what is the thing that we want the community to take away from this post, right? We don't just want to provide them with information, but we want to help them, further the progress towards healing. And so that, I think, has been a really integral part of not just being relatable, but also being something that people, care about and they want to continue to receive going forward.
Thank you, George.
Mm-hmm.
Did I hear Ornella trying to wedge in there where there was a little overlap? Was that Ornella or somebody else?
Oh, that was me.
Hey, Venus, you go.
I think I was just going to say, like, it's all a learning process, especially with social media. We're trying different things and learning as we're going. But I think George really said it, like, we want to make sure that we're hitting those points where it's empowering, where people feel like it's a healing element with the information. But again, you know, with everything, it's so much information, things are happening quickly. And we are just, you know, trying to keep it real and learning as we go.
You guys are doing great work. We thank you for your time today. We know we took you away from that great work. So we're at the top of the hour. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the audience. We did capture this talk and we'll have it available to share out. And we'll keep an eye on you guys, circling back to get some more lessons learned. Thank you, one and all. Bye for now.
Thank you.